Well, good afternoon to you, Scott Baker. We've got a wonky one today.
Yeah, yeah. I think in the 4.5 years of doing field notes, and in the couple of years we've been doing these daily conversations about the day's field note. Which, by the way, welcome to Lead Better, another edition here. We're going to talk about, let me define the wonkiness, as Mikey said, just right out of the gate. The title is the unique challenging the yeah, great, the unique challenge of leading in a matrix organization. It's Field Note 1640. The bad news is this is not about like actually Neo. Like there's no cool suits or sunglasses or anything in this Field Note.
Keanu Reeves will not be making a guest appearance.
No, yeah, and I think here's what I'm going to predict. This is a nuts and bolts, no fun kind of field note that has some very specific things in it. But I do think that we all probably, even if we think, I don't even know what a matrix organization is. I don't know if I'm in one. I don't know if I'm leading one. I do know that it sounds kind of weird. We're going to figure that out. And I think we're actually going to find something that might be actually pretty powerful. So I'm not sure what it is, but I have a feeling that you and I are going to be able to do this because I've got a couple of facts and figures to throw at you. But
Okay.
first of all, the field note describes a weak matrix and a strong matrix and a balanced matrix. But when you hear matrix organization, what do you think about?
Well, the first thing I think of is an analogy like a spider web. Like some organizations are top down, like a line, and other organizations are kind of spread out in a way that where you get resources, who you go to for approval, that spread of who's in charge and who actually makes decisions and how it is that I can navigate inside of it is a lot more complicated than in a top-down organization where you're just following orders. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think that's my estimation. Is that what you think?
Well, I mean, and here's the good thing is that there are top-down hierarchies that exist in reality, right? But there are also spider webs, as you indicated, which is the matrix. The field note refers to it as a grid. Well, you could think about a spider web as a grid in an oval, right? They're not always just rectangular. And in many ways, that is kind of like real life. Real life doesn't really present itself all the time. Like you don't drive down the street in your neighborhood and you're like, well, I know who the king of the neighborhood is and I know who is second in command. It's a little fuzzier, right? Yeah. So with that, the definition, let's get to this before we get to some of the research around it. The matrix that we're talking about here is when instead of you having a single line of reporting, whether you're the boss looking down or you're the person who has the leader, maybe you report to two different people. So in the example they give is you might have a finance team and there's one centralized function. So there's a corporate finance department. With me on that? And then the example in the field note is individual team members within that finance unit might have a business unit where there is a finance head in that unit who reports to the head of corporate finance. So you're there, but you kind of have to talk to both.
Right.
And sometimes you're hearing from the head of your unit, and sometimes you're hearing from the head of the entire centralized function. And you actually need to listen to both. That's the whole point. And so you're in this place where it's like, okay, I actually see opportunity here, but I can see a lot of potential problems.
Right. And so those organizations have a tendency to be more nimble. It's faster to be able to make decisions in organizations like that, but you still need to figure out, okay, how does this actually work? And a lot of times cultures are born and people haven't really organized. It's not like they haven't designed a flow chart, but the way that an organization actually works is a lot more like this crazy spider web matrix than Now, it doesn't mean that you need to destroy the web. There's actually a lot of stability in thinking of it like if it was a brick wall, there's a couple of bricks you would pull out and the whole wall would fall apart. As opposed to if it's a trampoline, there's probably, close to 40 of the springs you could pull out of a trampoline and you could still bounce on that thing just fine.
Yeah. Maybe I'm going to let you test out that trampoline first. Yeah, to see how that works.
You don't have any problem with pulling out one spring to be able to examine it, where you would be concerned about that if you were pulling a brick out of a wall.
Yeah. We're playing a weird kind of Jenga here. So so let me give the definitions from the field note, and we can see what the nuances are. Because I do want to get to two things because I was like, I need some way to attach this. So I kind of like went deep on what this would look like in a matrix organization. But a weak matrix, if you're like, all right, you're scoring at home, and thank you if you're listening on the podcast, that would be where the functional leader dominates. And then you have your daily or project leader, and they have limited authority, right? So you got the real boss, and then you kind of got the next boss, but he's always going to be second guessed, or she's always going to be second guessed by the other person. The strong matrix is where the project leader closest to you has the primary authority, and the functional leader, they're going to manage strategy, resource allocation. How much budget are we doing to this? What's the workforce like? You can hire 2 additional people. No, you can't. Like they're at that point, but they're really letting the other person that has the influence here have the dominant role. Now, weak, strong sounds like, okay, well, that's the one. Well, no, wait, we got to get to balanced here. Right. The balanced matrix is where the functional and the project leaders share the authority relatively equally. Right. And you say, well, that's great. Let's all hug and sing Kumbaya. But guess what? Politics is messier than that. Yes. So even if you're trying for the balanced matrix, it could get a little bit uncomfortable if you don't have the right guidelines.
Right. Because in a balanced matrix, that push and pull of like, I have authority, but he also has authority to make a decision in the same area means that egos need to be in check. It means that if you've got one person who has the proclivity to just kind of run with things and be bull in a china shop, they won't even realize that the person who is a lot more passive in the way they make decisions feels run over, right? And so you could easily get to the point where you are shooting for a balanced matrix, but the person who just has more natural aggression in the way they make decisions ends up being the real boss, right? Yeah. So there needs to be a structure around this so that personalities don't just take over.
Yeah. Well, and then this is the big difference. So the field note is saying you need to know what kind of organization you're in, right? If you're going to actually have a chance here, you're going to be like, all right, what's going on here? Whether you're the leader or you're the team member, am I in one of these balance things? If I'm in one of these, I just kind of got to know where I am. Because if I'm in a true matrix organization, there are these 3 elements of influence, collaboration, and negotiation, right? Who's influencing who's cooperating with who's negotiating with who, right? Yeah. That's all going to come into play. Now, let me throw this at you because we're about halfway through the discussion, and then let's see where this goes. So in one of the studies that really looked at this, this is maybe 10 years ago, they found that in matrix organizations, and I'm going to go with the bad news first. So really grip and feel the bad news here.
All matrix organizations, whether they're weak or strong, or are we just talking about?
We're talking about all of them because they inherently, all of them to some degree or another, create ambiguity, right? That's, even as I describe them all, you can feel the ambiguity there. And so that ambiguity part is actually really important because what happens is, to the negative side, 2 times higher levels of conflict. That doesn't sound good. Right. 2.5 times more time in meetings. Remember the other day we were just talking about how much time people spend in meetings or don't spend in meetings? Next one, significantly more confusion among everybody about their roles.
Right.
All of that. So, all right, here we are. We're in the matrix organization. We got more conflict, more meetings, more confusion. Well, guess what? In matrix organizations, there is a much higher output of innovation.
Right.
Much higher. You'd be like, as an organization, do we want to be the most innovative in our sector? Well, yeah. Do we want to be pushing the envelope, creating new options, meeting new customer needs? Absolutely. Is the cost of that ambiguity? Are we willing to deal with a little bit more conflict, sometime more in meetings, a bit of ambiguity about role confusion? Maybe that's the price you pay.
Right. No, it's
interesting.
Because that correlation is not something that a lot of people would come to naturally. They wouldn't think that we have 2.5 more times meetings than anybody else in our industry. And as a result, well, is it a result or is it just a correlation? We are more innovative. We're actually hitting things more. You would think that the most innovative companies, there would be some kind of control going on, but
Mm-hmm.
the innovation would be the autonomy of individuals to be able to just kind of make
Mm-hmm.
decisions and go on their own. So that balanced matrix, I don't know. I'm still kind of torn here after hearing those statistics, whether or not
Mm-hmm.
a balanced matrix is better than a weak matrix.
Yeah,
Like,
and this, by the way, this was in a study in the Harvard Business Review, and so therefore it has the word Harvard, so it must be legit, right? Like here's the social proof that we're looking for, just in names. Now, so the question is, and and I'll add this in. I think that we actually, in the Admired Leadership team, there's a degree of a matrixed organization to some degree, but we have known from now Admired Leadership has been around for almost 40 years, the digital platform, things we've been doing, that's, more like 5-6 years, but there is a lot of ambiguity, particularly kind of in a startup operation within a large organization around roles, titles, who reports to who, all of that. And there is a clear preference in the ownership and leadership of the parent organization for a little bit of ambiguity.
yes.
And maybe that is because then it produces some of that. Now, it's not what you want. Like I knew when I was back working for decades in media and news organizations, I was aware, certainly from people that I really knew inside a major national, dominant news organization, that the person running that organization liked to put people in charge of the projects at the same time just to see them eat each other. So there'd be 3 people that would each think that they were in charge of that thing, right? Like let's say it's the website for the company and be like, well, this person's this, they're the East Coast head of this thing and they're the West Coast head and they're the international head. Right. And well, who's in charge? Well, all of you, right? And then they would just eat each other alive. And the goal was to see who was the most Nietzschean carnivore possible that would destroy the other ones and they would just rise to power. And you'd be like, oh gosh. Now, I'm not saying that's a good way to operate a company, but you see it.
Yeah.
So,
but I could see that being by design if you want one person to rise to power, but what you end up with is a very different kind of matrix organization once that heavy-handed leader does wrestle power and decision-making ability from the other two, then the organization looks very different forward.
Yeah, very much so.
Maintaining your matrix needs to be something where you end up beating that person back. The balance of powers, the check on people's abilities needs to be something like in government, we call it a constitutional crisis. But what is a constitutional crisis more than just a discussion over whether or not your authority should or should not be recognized or exercised, right?
Yep.
Instead, you should just take time to yield right now. We call it a constitutional crisis because we're having a little bit of a discussion about it or an argument about it, right? At what point does it become a crisis? I think in a matrix organization like this, you've got constitutional crises all the time. So the real point here in the field note is like, if you're coming from somebody you've been in an organization that is very top down, where everyone has their exact title, everyone knows exactly what to do. You leave that organization, you go into one that is more matrix, maybe it's a balanced matrix. You're not going to know how to operate in an organization like that unless you kind of understand the beast that you're actually looking at.
Well, let's go then both to the leader and the team members to what would be the superpower. Like, what's the thing that would always be true in a matrixed organization, according to this field note, which I think there's a great argument for it, because it implies, for all the reasons you just said and the things we've talked about, that people in those, there's a little bit of am I in the United Nations here, right? You're a bit of a diplomat all the time. You're trying to kind of gain, well, if I don't have positional power, well, then how do I create influence, right? That if I can't make people obey my orders like I'm a captain in the military, well, then how do I bring about my level of advocacy or persuasion or whatever it is? Well, the through line for everybody here in these organizations is what the field note calls informational power. And that's a great thing to hold on to, which is, well, what do you know that other people don't see? like, or maybe they've seen the same data, but your unique perspective has brought a special power to that. And can you become the person that is just known for their great judgment around the kind of information they're bringing to the table? And so at that point, that's like, it's really just, are you doing your homework? Are you paying attention? Are you okay just not trying to be like, I'm worried about my compensation and my title, and is this person going to like me, and where am I positioned over here, and is the board going to react to me? To be like, do you know your job? Are you doing your job? Do you know more about your industry, about your clients? Have you spent more time with them? Are you on the front lines with the R&D team? Whatever it is, can you bring that informational power to bear? That becomes the card that is the thing that you want to be holding at all times in a matrix organization.
Right. Now, that sounds dangerous in the hands of the wrong person.
What could be? Yeah. If you were holding it, like, I'm not going to tell you what I got.
Yeah. Right. But being the person who does their homework because they like to share that information, as holding on to it, is a powerful person.
And that's where the field note comes around to, which is, how do you build trust?
Yeah.
And I think then that comes to just the reciprocal nature of, I'm gathering information. I love doing it. I love putting this together. I want my team to do well, but I also want the organization to do well. So are you developing the kind of informational power that is then valuable to all the leaders in the matrix? I think it's a good thing. Now, we're over time, and you might have a brilliant thing to add there, but I wanted to add one more piece because I think you could react to it. Because when I looked up this complication of matrix organizations, one of the things that came up was Formula One teams, and you pay attention to that world more than I do. And it was saying that different teams like Mercedes, McLaren, that it's a live matrix at every race, because the race engineering reports to the chief engineer, but also to the race strategists, also to the team principal. And so in that, and the quote here was from the race engineer for Lewis Hamilton for a long time, who said, decisions are shared across functions in milliseconds, and nobody owns the whole picture. So one, you've watched more of this. Do you think that that's a good analogy to matrix organizations? It doesn't map to most of our actual day-to-day applications in milliseconds, but
Right.
does the analogy hold?
I suppose in organizations that do financial trading where split-second decisions are made, then, but you do, at that point, you really only have one person. There might be all kinds of inputs for that, but yeah, provided you could slow it down and understand how that decision was made, and you're actually breaking down that there's 7 different people that in literally 3 seconds went into that decision-making process. Trust that you brought up earlier is so important in that, because the driver, if Lewis Hamilton is the one who's ultimately making the decision, he needs to trust whether or not the information that he's getting, someone says box, box, box on the radio, and he's like, I think it's 3 more laps from now, I'll actually be a little bit better position to come out on a better spot on the track. Why am I doing it now? And you hear some of those things happen on the radio where they question back and forth. The driver actually has to be the one who makes the decision. But thinking of the driver as the CEO is not necessarily the best analogy there. Like, it's a complicated way of making decisions.
Yeah.
Great analogy. I love the fact that it was brought up in what you read there, because we could probably break it down and try to model an organization after that. The advantage is that you can spread that over the course of a day.
Yeah.
You're literally making those decisions in seconds.
Yeah. Well, we should, it'd be fun to do that. We have in Admired Leadership, we've spent a lot of time with people in NASCAR. We've spent a lot of time with people in IndyCar. I don't know that we've had a lot of people who are fans of Formula One, but I don't know that we've ever been able to spend a lot of time observing and studying the teams or hearing from the leaders in those teams, but that might be fun. Well, look, here's the question here for this Saturday discussion that we've had around this, as you said, wonky or nerdy topic. And I said, this is just nuts and bolts of stuff here. I think it was pretty solid.
Yeah. I think it's our longest recording on record. So
there you go. Okay. It took us a long time to get through it. So, all right. Thank you.